Hey, this is Sven Hosford again with our Freedom from Mold podcast, and I have three amazing guests on. I'm so excited, so happy to be doing this. We have Erik Johnson, Kealy Severson, and Alicia Swamy from Exposing Mold. It's a great website. It's a great Facebook page, and you should be on it all the time, checking things out because these guys are really on top of it. Some amazing stories we'll cover and some real good advice about having to deal with mold. The word is avoidance, and I'm really interested, really looking forward to getting into that. So welcome, guys. Nice to have you here.
Good to be here.
Let's start with Kealy. You're the president, so I'm assuming you're in charge. So give us a short version of your mold history, your bio, how you came to be here running this organization.
Well, I grew up in a damp building and had health effects my whole life. And throughout the years, I would say all 39 years, I've been exposed unknowingly. I started having pot symptoms at around age 9 or 10, and it just was downhill from there. In 2019, I was a renter with my family, and our health was worse than it had ever been when my husband discovered a lot of black mold under our sink. And as a practicing acupuncturist and herbalist, I became interested in wanting to pursue this in my clinic that I had at the time, like specializing this, screening my patient population for this, because what I had observed is my family of 5 that I thought all had normal health symptoms like bloody noses, recurrent infections, mood disturbances that I had justified as normal was actually part of this exposure. So I started to get this picture of how vast this symptom presentation could be. And I started making videos and stuff. And I was connected to Erik because those videos were shared online, and Erik and I connected. In my next rental immediately after that, we unknowingly went from hidden mold to hidden mold. And in that rental, it was February of 2020. And I know this sounds weird. It's almost embarrassing to say. But I had like a few days where I was like auditorily hearing things. And the message was exposing mold, exposing mold, exposing mold, exposing mold. And I didn't know at the time that our townhouse had hidden mold. And it was driving me insane. And so I literally just registered the domain. I'm like, okay, I know I want to work in this field. This is annoying me. I just registered the domain, and then it stopped being on like record repeat in my head. And then I literally exposed mold in my townhouse again. I was in a situation where I was suspicious of it. Me and my husband found it with taking a crowbar to our cabinets to discover the hidden Stachybotrys. We sampled it ourselves to prove what it was, and our landlord wasn't assisting us in proper repair or any repair, honestly. And at that point, I just thought, okay, that was the exposing mold. That was just my intuition giving me a heads up that I would be exposing mold again in my rental. And Erik and I just continued to speak with each other. I continued to work with him, to learn from him. He was the only person that I could ask a mold question to who had an answer that made sense. Mm-hmm. My other colleagues or other doctors, like my doctor just wanted to check my thyroid. My other colleagues that were interested in mold, they didn't have explanations that actually made sense or fit my experience. So I really, really kind of gravitated towards Erik because he was the only one who was having explanations that were matching my health experiences. And the Facebook page Exposing Mold formed that month, the same month that I registered that domain name. But we didn't grow into a nonprofit until we were all together. It was like, I always knew that there was going to be this other arm where I wanted to really serve the public somehow and really embrace this, that I feel like is something I'm meant to be doing. It's been my whole life history. I just kind of feel like, not to be weird, but it's almost like destiny that we have to tackle this. But something clicked when the 3 of us got together. When Erik and I paired up with Alicia, that's when the magic happened. It's like the synergy between the 3 of us. Mm-hmm. we joke all the time, between all three of us, we're a fully functioning person. We're on fire. And so that's kind of the backstory.
What part of the country do you live in?
I'm in Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. Okay. Yeah. So Alicia, let's hear your story. How did you get encumbered by mold, and how'd you connect up with these guys?
Yeah, I mean, I've had so many exposures that, I didn't know what was going on. It was just health issue after health issue and jumping from doctor to doctor, just like everyone's story. I'm sure you've been through it, Sven. I mean, it's the same old song with this mold game. We had bought a home, and I kept regressing and getting worse in this home, and so I started to look on Facebook groups, and I feel like that was really a contributing factor to my saving my health and my life. I had posted questions in random groups that weren't associated with mold, but someone had made the comment that, hey, check your house for mold. This might be an issue. So I went ahead and did that. I, consulted with a mold doctor, and I found Erik and Kealy, and almost similar to what Kealy had just said, is that I just resonated with what Erik had to say. And I felt like my life was so in danger and I was so desperate, and I wasn't really receiving help from quote unquote mold literate doctors. They were actually making me worse with their protocols that I just decided to take the plunge into avoidance. I said, hey, what do I have to lose? I'm literally on death's door. I'm going to do what I have to do. We packed up and left our home vacant, and we set out for nowhere. We didn't know where we were going to go. We lived in our car. My husband was extremely supportive. Thank God. So I'm very lucky and very privileged in that regard. And I know a lot of people don't have that support. And I think number one, that's most important for people who are dealing with mold, is really having support and belief that you are going through something and it is environmentally driven. So we went, out into the desert. I mean, literally, word for word, and, Erik, these days, mold avoidance is not going out to the desert and living in a tent, but that's how I perceived it. And I said, hey, if that's what's going to save my life, I'm going to do it. And so that's what I did. And I got better. Then I fell into a second exposure in a basically a brand new apartment in the outskirts of the desert. And I'm like, what the hell? What's going on? And so I really I started at that point really practicing strict avoidance. I didn't really get a grasp on it initially. And I think a lot of people don't. I think that's why it's so important to consult with a coach or someone or our team, or I don't know, Sven, if you're going to be offering that, to really help guide you through this, because it's so nitpicky and it's so important to be aware of every single thing in your environment as you are getting out of the environment.
Yeah.
And that's most important. And we didn't do that originally, but we did that the second time, and I rebounded quickly.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I am a hypersensitive individual. That means I cannot stand being in a very toxic environment with black mold for very long. So I have to navigate my life and myself according to how I feel. And I feel like that's the most important tool, is believing in your body and trusting yourself and trusting your senses to get through these toxic exposures. It's not going to be a supplement, a treatment, a test. All of these things are nice to have. They're nice little tools to put in your toolbox, but that's not the sole thing that you should be focusing on. I feel like in this journey, it's definitely avoidance, and avoidance has taken me very far. And I'm just so grateful for Kealy and Erik. And, when I was going through all this and going from doctor to doctor, when I get angry, I get extremely motivated. Like that really sets a fire under my ass. Sorry if there's no cursing in this, but I am going to go there because that's my personality. It really lit a fire under my butt to get things going, to really help people, because I was so upset how I was treated by doctors. And so Kealy had started exposing mold. I was debating on other, foundations. There were other foundations floating around in the mold sphere, but I didn't feel like anyone was really understanding the true nature of what was going on. And Erik, I mean, he's he's the prototype patient for mold in CFS. Like he is the guy that you want to be connected to and you want to continue working with. And Kealy, she is so fierce and so motivated. And she basically felt how I felt, like what's going on in this whole mold realm. There's a lot of shit under wraps and we need to expose it. And so that's what we did. And like Kealy said, we're our synergy and the way that we work, it's so great. And sometimes we don't agree all the time, but we know that we all share the same passion and the same level of commitment to this work. It's beyond me, it's beyond Kealy, it's beyond Erik, and it's more about pushing the mission and helping people and helping them get well and basically throwing them a life raft when everyone is throwing them who knows what, a bottle of water when they're drowning or a pill when they're drowning. Like you need that life raft. You don't need a pill to save you when you're drowning, right?
Right.
And so that's basically what we're doing. And I'm just so grateful. I mean, we're not sitting here getting rich. I don't care if I ever get rich from this. I just really want to help people, and it's in my heart and my soul. And, we're not the most liked. And I totally get that. And we don't resonate with everyone. Well, eventually people are going to resonate with us when those other methods don't work.
Well, when you tell people things they don't want to hear, that generally just try to tune you out,
Yeah.
And,
I mean, the truth is the truth. If you don't like it, I mean, that's your perception, that you have to work on your perceiving end, right? Because the truth is not going to change.
yeah.
And we're not here to sugarcoat it. And again, we're seeing basically an influx of so many people that have gone to these quote unquote mold experts that are selling these devices and pills and treatments, and they're not getting any better. And we're seeing a growing explosion of the hypersensitive population, and they're coming to us. And I really wish that they would come to us first, so that way they can save themselves the grief, the suffering, and the money that a lot of these people are charging, because avoidance is really where it's at.
Well, I'm really looking forward to getting into that, but let's get a couple words from Erik here about his story. Now, we could take up the rest of the podcast just telling your story, Erik, but let's suffice it to say that you've been through two major mold exposures. One was in Truckee High School. Am I right about that?
Yeah, that's right.
And then in the military in Hitler's bunker. And that is a story you have to go read online. That is just hair-raising in so many ways. But tell us about the things that you have discovered, the impact that you've made on the whole industry.
Well, howdy from Incline Village, Nevada, kind of a famous place for starting chronic fatigue syndrome. By a very strange confluence of circumstances, I wound up being selected as the very first prototype for Holmes' 1988 chronic fatigue syndrome. I mean, talk about destiny. What a bizarre situation.
Yeah. Am I right in that they've identified this 1988, they've identified that mold is the source of chronic fatigue syndrome?
No.
I
This
got
has
that
not
wrong.
been identified.
Okay. It's been theorized?
No.
I'm
That's
totally
the
wrong.
peculiar thing. You see, thanks to my prior mold experience, I was familiar with it at the time of the CDC investigation into a mysterious fatiguing illness that was sweeping Incline Village and Truckee. And I managed to recognize that the people who failed to recover from this viral illness were all in mold exposures. So I attempted to tell this to researchers, and they were extremely resistant. There was nothing in the literature at that time. So that was the peculiar thing, is that in the middle of this huge investigation, which is known the world over, extremely famous, and even describes sick buildings as being part of it, not a single doctor or researcher was able to come up with the theory that toxic mold was involved.
I mean, this is one of those conundrums I just can't get around. Is what is the blindness in doctors that they are so unwilling to see the evidence right in front of their face? Why are they so sure that mold doesn't cause problems?
Well, I call it academic insanity. But I feel that in addition to the scientific study of this particular phenomenon, equally important is the sociological aspect, the way doctors are behaving toward this.
Mhm.
Because when various researchers came to look at this circumstance, they all got into a big conflict, an argument with each other. Each came with their own preconceived notions, their own pet theory. And if they saw something they didn't like, they would simply ignore it,
Mhm.
such as the sick buildings and Truckee High School. I mean, here's a cluster of sick teachers in a sick building. This was the absolute core of why Dr. Cheney called the Center for Disease Control for help. And when they looked at it, all they saw was a viral infection, and they blinded themselves to the way it was at the front of the school, and in particular, 9 teachers in a single room. Now, to a normal person, I mean, the layman mentality, you would want to know what the heck is in that room.
Mhm.
This didn't occur to doctors. In fact, when mold was brought to their attention, they said, you have no evidence. You can't prove it.
Yeah. I have a theory that, doctors get into this mindset, and partially it's just their training from med school, but partially it's the system constrains their operations. But it's like, if there isn't a pill to fix it, it's not a problem. And that seems to be the mindset, and then it's this one-to-one relationship. You have one problem, so you have one solution, and there's one direct line that goes between them. And as you were saying, Alicia, that it's going to take a full court press. It takes all these different things in order for you to really get clear of mold. So let's talk about avoidance. This is a really fascinating topic. Erik, why don't you start us off with what's the broad outline when you talk about avoidance? And I see you sitting there in this pristine Nevada sunshine. Is that part of your avoidance?
Absolutely. Being outdoors, it seems to kick the body into detox mode. Mm-hmm. It appears that after you've been triggered by this sensitizing agent, the toxic mold, that you become susceptible to other volatile organic compounds in your environment, such as formaldehyde, or if there's any propane wafting through the air, anything that you can inhale, you seem more vulnerable to it. So I feel that a major portion of recovery is just spending time in nature, out in the fresh air.
In the book that you wrote and that I'm still reading, you talk about taking a sabbatical. You take an avoidance sabbatical. You want to describe that a little bit?
Well, actually, a sabbatical, I prefer the term mold hiatus.
I like
or
that
simply
too.
Getting clear.
Yeah.
But it's just the concept that when you've been fired up by mold, your body locks down on all toxins. It doesn't want to release any of it. And during the Lake Tahoe outbreak, when everybody was trying every conceivable detoxification regimen that anybody could invent, a couple of us discovered that just by going out to the desert, which is only an hour to the east of us, just spending time out in a barren, pristine location, we had more recovery than anything that anybody was doing back in town. So that was the basis of Getting Clear. It was just an experiment to find out, can you go out to a really pristine location and achieve some kind of recovery?
And Alicia, are you still on tour with your husband across the desert?
Yeah, we, to be honest with you, this is something that we always dreamed of doing. And I feel like life is pretty crazy in the way that it nudges you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it forced us to do this. I felt like everything that we were going through just wasn't working out. And I told my husband, look, this is the opportunity to A, help me get better, and B, live something that we've been wanting to do for such a long time. And so we're doing it. And I'm so thankful that we are, because I feel amazing. I mean, I feel like when I'm in this really great environment, I feel like I've never been sick. Like my body just is doing what it needs to do. I'm back to exercising and running up hills. My
Nice.
personality is, back. I'm happy. I'm loving my husband and having fun with my dog. And so, it's just been such a great experience. And I'm just so grateful that, not grateful that I went through mold, but grateful that mold has pushed me to actually basically live how
Live
I
your
want to
dreams.
live.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that. Can't wait to get out there and join you. Kealy, how do you practice avoidance? There in Wisconsin.
I know. I try
you
not
have
to
a lot of
emphasize
mold
that
issues
part.
there too.
So avoidance.
How do you practice avoidance?
Can you hear me?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Avoidance to me really means trusting my body and understanding when I'm experiencing a symptom to something, even if it's something that maybe doesn't make sense. And this is something that I've definitely learned from Erik. And it's something that he helped teach me as he was supporting me while I was sick and I was asking him questions and he would help me make sense of my experience. I realized when I'd reach out and ask him a question about something through that mentoring time that he was gracious enough to just give to me, I started to realize I'm having internal reactions from external people, places, and things, even if they've just been in a moldy environment. And sometimes it feels like anxiety. Sometimes it feels like an itchy face. Sometimes it feels like my heart's going to explode. And all of those things to me are not different diagnoses. Those are all of my reactions. And it took me a long time, I would say a year and a half to 2 years, like experiencing this, of feeling this heart race around this item that was been in a moldy house and then getting away from it and feeling better, getting this item out of my house and then feeling better. And I think the biggest misconception about mold avoidance is people think that we're literally dodging mold spores. Like mold spores are probably in the air that I'm breathing right now. When I walk to my car, there's mold spores there, but I'm not necessarily having these same reactions. I'm not living my life to dodge invisible mold spores. And I'm also not completely like panicked and in this state of fear that I have to avoid all mold. I feel like mold avoidance gets this rap when people don't understand what it is. They characterize us mold avoiders as being fearful of our environment and taking extreme measures and being, paranoid from the trauma of our experience. And while the experience can be traumatic, it's not the trauma that's making me react. It's a physical reaction that's real. And really just trusting my body, trusting my reactions, not thinking that I'm crazy when I feel something way off, even if it's from a plate that obviously has no mold growth on it, is not porous, and in theory should be able to be washed. I trust my body more than the fact that I can't see anything on this plate that's making me sick. And I would say that's what avoidance means to me.
So the key really then is to learn your triggers, learn those symptoms that you get first.
I would say
to let you know.
It's twofold. It's the first part would have to be the hiatus, where Erik says a hiatus, because this is the part where when we're away from our environment, our bodies have a chance to calm down, kind of stop reacting to everything. And in our industry, we call this unmasking, where it's almost taking the mask off that was preventing you from sensing the toxins. You're in the toxins, you're sick, you don't really know what's going on, but you can't point to an object and say, this object is making me sick. But when you take a hiatus from that whole environment and you leave and then you come in and then your immune system responds pretty quickly, it's so obvious that it's the environment. So that hiatus to get clear, to help refine your senses, is a big part of it. And then trusting your senses when you are reacting, even if those reactions are diverse or not always exactly the same, trusting that can be a reaction, and then letting those senses guide your health. Not a test result, not an ERMI, not a mycotoxin report. Your body's reactions are your ultimate compass. and trusting that
I love
and letting
that.
it guide you to
Yeah.
health.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to need the transcript of that for our website. That was so good.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a saying. I say, your body is much smarter than you are, and it's really just a fact of learning to listen to your body, learning to feel your body. I took a air filter that I had out on the front porch, opened it up, and got hit in the face with a bunch of dust and of course mold, and I reacted like that. Light sensitivity, visual acuity goes down, anxiety comes up, and I think it's really instructive to learn those symptoms and learn and just recognize how fast they come on after an exposure like that. Erik, in your book, you talk about it like doing the, what do they call it? The elimination diet. It's very similar to that. If you go without glutens for 30 days and then have a sandwich, you'll know right away whether you are triggered by glutens. Is that about right?
Yeah, getting clear of all external triggers and then re-exposure, you become highly primed to your main irritant, the one that's bothering you the most. So by going out to the desert and returning, very often people can point specifically at the mold in their house that's making them sick. And then it's a simple matter to test that mold and find out which species are involved.
Yeah.
It's fascinating that you bring up the filters, because there's a lot to be learned from the original chronic fatigue syndrome cluster. And I'm talking about the first group of teachers who described their experience. And when doctors and researchers were confused about this, they went to Gary Holmes, the Center for Disease Control, the CDC epidemiologist. And what did they ask for? They asked him to look into the filters in that room, examine the filters specifically. And this is documented. So when it comes to avoidance, the very first thing that these teachers said was it paid to get out of that room. I mean, that's avoidance in a nutshell.
Yeah. I always tell people when I coach them or counsel with them, it's like, number one, you have to leave the toxic environment you're in before you start working on cleansing and detoxing your body. It just won't work. Toxins trump everything. You've got to get out of that moldy environment. I think you guys pointed that out on a recent podcast. It's like, that's got to be the number one thing that we really, promote to people. Get out of that environment. So along with that, let's talk about knowing some of the types of mold and which are dangerous and which are not dangerous, or perhaps just benign. Kealy, do you want to start with that? Like, how do you know which molds to avoid?
Well, we're all going to have the same answer on this.
Okay.
We are all particularly interested in Stachybotrys because that was the mold that was found in the teacher's lounge, which is the room where the teachers got sick, and the reason Dr. Cheney called the CDC, and essentially why chronic fatigue syndrome was coined as a term. So we're particularly interested in Stachybotrys. What is it doing? How has it changed? How is it interacting with the environment? What's going on here? We all hold the position that molds that produce trichothecenes like Fusarium, Chaetomium, maybe there are others, Stachy, they're of particular interest. We know that most people, a lot of people focus on Aspergillus, and we know that that's the most common mold found in the home. But we also know that a Stachybotrys colony could be somewhere nearby and not found in the testing, since it's very frequently missed in testing. And so I think that it's very possible that even though people think that they've been destroyed by Aspergillus, that there was also Stachybotrys in the house that wasn't found, that was part of their health profile. Erik always makes this point, carpenters who are cutting wood all day with this natural wood that's just full of Aspergillus, they're not falling over with mold illness, so what's going on with the trichothecene producers? So that's what we're really interested in.
and it's true too that some people, you take a group of people, put them in an environment, only one may go down with any kind of problem. Did you hear that the co-star on the new Maverick movie, the new Top Gun movie, got so sick from being in a fighter jet? They went to the doctor and they said, you've got jet fuel in your blood, jet fuel and fire retardant. And that's why he was so sick. And nobody else got sick. I mean, Tom Cruise still running around, didn't get sick.
Well, you make a really good point there because, I mean, maybe I should let Erik pick up here, but some of these things that are found in the environment, how are they interacting with the mold? Is the mold feeding on them and producing new toxins? Is there an interaction that's going on? What's happening? Erik has a very detailed theory regarding this. Maybe I should let him say if he wants to speak on that.
Take it away, Erik.
Well, as a sensitizing agent, something that helps destroy your immune defenses towards other volatiles, if you've been exposed to mold, you're going to be reacting to anything else, including jet fuel. There's a very famous leukemia cluster not too far away from Tahoe at the Fallon Naval Air Station, which is the equivalent of Top Gun, essentially. It's where all the jet fighters practice flying out. In fact, Top Gun was filmed in this very location. And people were getting sick with various fatiguing illnesses, plus succumbing to cancers, leukemia, and nobody could figure out why. And they suspect that JP8, there's an additive in jet fuel that makes it less flammable than normal jet A. And there's something about this military jet fuel that's particularly harmful. But still, since not everybody was getting sick with it, no pattern was ever found. And I suspect that previous mold exposure might be rendering them susceptible, and possibly this person who got sick during the film could have been exposed to toxic mold, didn't know it, and had this kind of susceptibility.
Yeah, I think that's true. I discovered that I'd been exposed to mold, when I really thought about it, all the way through my life, including going into the Navy, serving on a ship, going overseas, serving on probably the moldiest island on the planet. But it didn't really become a bad trigger until I was 56 years old. So I can see where it's previous exposure. Well, let's talk about, let's dig a little bit deeper into some of the things to avoid in your house. Now, what's the word on houseplants? How do you guys feel about houseplants? Anybody want to take it? No problem? Okay.
I don't think there's a particular thing that you can avoid. It's more so just sensing your environments and feeling
Just
them out.
being aware.
There aren't like danger zones or known danger things that, we all have to avoid or be wary of. I think you're just constantly hyper alert, no matter where you are, when you are hypersensitive. And like you said earlier, correlating your symptoms to what's going on in your environment and knowing, those symptoms and being able to say, okay, this environment is not good. I therefore have to leave.
Are there certain things we should be watchful for, like moldy fruit? When I open it up and I see mold on it, is it already too late? Have I already sniffed the mold? Or does it matter? Is that like a benign mold? It doesn't.
To me, that doesn't matter at all.
Doesn't matter.
I have no problem with moldy fruit, moldy bread. If black mold grows on an onion, I just cut it off and eat it anyway.
Cut it off. Okay. Yeah, because like avocados, and you open it up and you see those little black spots, you just cut those off, right?
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's good. Yes. But like cheese, like we should be avoiding cheese, right? That like is mold. No? You say no?
No.
Okay. Even blue cheese, the stinkiest blue cheese.
Love blue cheese.
Sorry,
All
Sven,
right.
you're not going to get much out of us if we're going to go down the line with individual.
But I think
things.
you're making a good point here, Sven, because what you're trying to ask, it seems like, with the food is, are there foods that people really need to avoid? And this is something that we do talk about, because people who are mold exposed do tend to have tons of food reactions. So in theory, do they need to avoid moldy foods? There are so many health coaches and so many mold platforms out there talking about the mold diet. And all of us have had extreme food sensitivities while in mold that have stopped after leaving. And so we view it as the food is not the problem. The environment causes the food sensitivities. If you properly address your environment, the food sensitivities will fall away. We've seen people become intolerant to meat, intolerant to gluten, intolerant to life, that are now living completely normal, consuming anything that they want because they're in a good environment.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent points.
Kealy's
I
on
was
fire
I was
today.
actually quite fortunate that my experience was so long ago that there were no mold experts. Because when they developed mold testing, they started saying, well, this species does this and this toxin does that and blah, blah, blah. And they started instilling all this fear about mold. And I'm going, mold? Mold doesn't bother me. I mean, I've never had a problem with oranges or mold on bread, nothing like that. No, there's something specific going on here. So as told in Dr. Shoemaker's book, Surviving Mold, I realized that mold on wood, no problem. The mold growing on the toilet, no problem. You know, none of this stuff. Moldy basements, I can go into moldy basements. They don't have any bother me at all. There's something specific here and I need to find it. So at great expense, I hired one of the early mold testers to come up from Sacramento and go around with me to various mold colonies. And I would disturb all of them, stir them up and inhale them. And he's going, well, I wouldn't do that if I were you. I'm going, I'll eat this on my peanut butter sandwich. I've never had a problem with this. I'm not worried about it now. No, there's something specific and we're going to find it. And we kept going until we found this nasty black mold on sheetrock in a water leak in the bathroom. That was the stuff. It knocked me flat. And I'm going, there it is. That's the stuff. What is it? And of course, it was Stachybotrys.
So black mold is Stachybotrys by and large?
Well, there's many hundreds of kinds of black mold.
Okay.
But this particular one, that was the stuff. And I realized that I can't be fearful of every black stain, every mold colony, every bit of aspergillus on wood, lumber mold. No. So I'm going to use my senses. And I'm going to learn to detect the stuff that bothers me and stay away from that. And the rest of it, I don't worry about it.
Okay. Well, we've talked about the avoidance. We've talked about learning when you've been triggered or sensitized. Let's talk about your detox tools. What are your favorite detox tools beyond the avoidance? Do you guys use like saunas? I have a celicizer. It keeps my lymph system moving. Cold tubs, cold shower after a hot shower, anything like that? Anybody want to take it? Nope.
I don't do a thing.
Just do the avoidance.
Nothing at all. No saunas, no detox, no binders, no nothing. And Dr. Shoemaker said, well, that's impossible because you have the double-dreaded genes. You're the most susceptible person. There's no way you should be able to recover this way. I go, well, Dr. Shoemaker, I'm using the avoidance strategies I learned in the military. So maybe I'm not avoiding mold the same way you think I am. Because the Army trained me to be observant for biological agents and how to avoid and decontaminate. And this is the strategy I'm using, and that's all I'm doing. And once he realized that my strategy was not running from every bit of mold, but using my observation and my senses to hone in on specifically what my primary irritant was, then he finally admitted that there was some merit to it.
I'll be darned. Well, Kealy, in the podcast I watched, you had mentioned that ozone might not be such a good tool to use in certain ways. Can you expand upon that a little bit?
Well, when we left our townhouse, which was our last rental that had mold, we tried to preserve some items and ozone them, and it didn't work. And actually, I think it made some things worse. And so that's just the the environment for ozone. I'm not familiar with the internal ozone that people use. I've never done anything like that. I know that I sweat after I've been in an exposure. So I think the body is just really underestimated for the amazing ability that it has to regulate itself. And when your body's sweating and releasing toxins, and Erik points out like detoxing through your breath. So like breath work to clear out your exhalations, kind of like clearing out the exhaust, the gross, dirty exhaust of a vehicle. I just think these are just natural things that the body can do all on its own that don't require supplements. And I think people really underestimate their body's ability to recover on their own. And especially when they don't understand how they can react to one specific contaminated object. And they think that they have 5 different diagnoses. So they think that they have to chase their health. I just think if people understood what mold could really do and how vast that presentation can really be, and if people understood it would stop out of contamination in a bad environment, and if people trusted their bodies to just help them recover, I don't think people would have to waste so much money down the drain trying a million different supplements.
Yeah.
Same here. I mean, I do what's available to me, and what we all know is healthy to do, and that's to be out in nature and exercise. And, when you're exercising, your breath is, increasing, going in and out. It's sort of like breath work all in one, and just sweating naturally in these natural environments. And just to really piggyback off of Kealy, yes, the body is extremely intelligent, as you also mentioned, Sven, that it knows what it needs to do when it's in a proper environment. So I trust myself more than I trust a activated charcoal pill or a bentonite clay pill. I think we recently just saw a post that her 16-year-old has been poisoned by bentonite clay with lead. And so I'm just like, like a lot of these things that are touted as helpful could be harmful. And, I know that me exercising and breathing outside isn't going to have a negative effect unless I'm breathing in some sort of toxic exposure, right? So you just have to take everything with a grain of salt.
Fascinating. Well, let's talk about your organization itself, Exposing Mold. You guys have a variety of different educational opportunities. You guys are all over podcasts, social media. Tell us some about what you got going on there, Kealy.
Well, Exposing Mold was created as an education and research center. Those are our goals. So if anyone wants to help donate to our mission, you can do that on our website. Erik is our education and research director. So he's really in charge. When you said, Kealy, I'll start with you because you're in charge. I'm like, no, that would be Erik. We all follow his lead. He's definitely our leader. Like if we have a question, that's who we go to. But
great.
To stay on track with your question, we're interested in applying social pressure publicly to force the research institutions who have the funding and the credentials and the research methods to kind of, we want to pressure people to be a lot more honest about what's going on in this industry. And we also want to be a voice to the mold injured people who are getting misinformation everywhere they turn. Everywhere they go, they're being lied to, they're being given bad advice, they're being misled. And we just want to be that lighthouse shining a beam of truth and honesty that can guide people towards their healing. So that's what Exposing Mold is for.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. Like I said, you guys, your posts, your resources, the books you recommend. Talk a little bit about since Erik is in charge. Erik, talk about your consultations that you do. People got a series of questions. They can hire you to answer them.
Well, when people jump into the mold expert business, they're kind of operating from a position that they have the answers and they can advise you on exactly what toxins are doing what and how you can develop a strategy to avoid it. And I'm a little different because I believe that there's so many unknowns that we really don't have a handle on what's going on here. Why is mold doing this? Why did no doctors understand it? How come no researchers can figure it out? How come these mold experts can't guide us and correlate their testing to what we perceive? So what I'm really educating people about is that there's a level of ignorance out there that requires a lot more research and people shouldn't be too eager to assume the expert position and act like they have the answers.
Yeah. It's been 7 years since I was poisoned. I had my heart attack. And I just really this last year feel like I have even a smidgen of enough information to give advice to anybody else. And a lot of that still comes from my almost 30 years of holistic health publishing. So I hear you when you say like most mold experts really don't know anything, because I feel like I don't even know all that much. And yet, I have people tell me, oh, you know more about mold than anybody else. Well, probably it's because everybody else doesn't know anything at all. So it's a big hill. We're just about there on time. What I'd like to give everybody an opportunity to kind of give one last thought to all these topics we've talked about today. Alicia, we haven't heard from. Let's hear from you. Any last thoughts about avoidance or anything else you think we might have missed?
I don't know
Alicia?
if it's my internet is messing up or is it Sven's, but can you repeat that question?
Yeah, I just got a little note that said, oh, sure. I got a little note that said my internet was flaky. Basically, just wanted to see if you have any last thoughts about all that we've talked about here. We're almost done with our podcast. I'd like to give everybody a chance to go through and anything you think we missed or any point you want to reinforce.
Yeah, I'm so excited to work with Erik and Kealy and continue help pushing the message forward and, putting the pressure on these researchers and doctors. And also, I'm really excited for the future. We have a lot of cool things coming up. We are looking to do a docu-series. We have some provider education content that we're producing. We're looking to start running our own little mini studies with some health devices that we've acquired. And we're just really excited. We love what we do. We do it selflessly daily, all hours of the day. I'm up in the middle of the night looking at articles, and Kealy will tell you she'll see a 4 a.m. article about this fungus and that. And I'm just really passionate and really immersed and really, I've always been a public servant, and it's always been a pleasure to help people. And I really love what we're doing. And our consults, I mean, Kealy is such a talented acupuncturist, herbalist. She does help people with symptoms with her herbs, her herbal blends. We do help guide people through avoidance with our consults at any stage of their life, and however their lifestyle is. We try to help people learn how to navigate their environments through using their senses. And yeah, I can't wait to do more and see what else unfolds. Who knows? The future is wide open. And so who knows what else will manifest with exposing mold.
Fantastic. Kealy, what about you? Any last points you want to make?
Well, I just want to say thank you for having us on and for giving us an opportunity to talk about our organization and our work and the history of chronic fatigue syndrome and the truth about mold avoidance, because there's so many misconceptions in our industry. So you supporting our work of helping us get an honest message out is so kind. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. Thank you for having us on.
You bet. I feel the same way. And I love having a link to you guys from our website so people can find you. And I really, really appreciate you guys coming on and do the podcast. And Erik will give you the last word.
Okay, the main thing that I want to convey to people is never underestimate the power of contamination. That many experts will try to convince you that they can test your house or test your place of work, and that alone will give you answers about your illness, where that might not be the case at all. Just what is carried from a really bad place on objects, on possessions, in your hair, back to your location can be a driving force in your illness. And always give that strong consideration. So thanks very much for having me.
Absolutely. And like I said, I've been reading your book on mold avoidance and fascinating insights. And I'm really glad that you guys all emphasize learn to listen to your body, learn to understand when it's reacting. Great advice. Great advice.
Yeah. I think
Again,
it's
thanks
so
very
empowering.
much. And I hope we can do it again. Yeah, it's very empowering. Very empowering.
Sorry
And,
for
and doctors don't want you to do that. So
I
that's
know.
all right.
Your internet keeps
Go ahead.
for me on my end, I don't know like when you're talking or not. So sorry if I interrupted. your internet keeps going in and out. I can't really
No
hear you.
worries.
But I did just want to say
That's
before we go that it is very empowering to know that healing can come from within you and not always external sources. And I think people just really need to really embody that and really understand that you don't need to spend your entire life savings trying to get well through external sources. The body knows what to do. Just give it the right tools.
Yeah. Yeah. Your body is the only thing that heals you. That's what I've come to learn. And it's all about giving your body the space and clean air, clean water, sunshine, the basics. So, well, great. Internet problems notwithstanding, it's been wonderful having y'all, and I hope we could do it again sometime.
Sure. Have us on anytime. Thanks again.
Great.
Yeah,
Sven.
we'd love
Awesome.
to see you again, Sven. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you all.